Hi.
Hello again.
We're going to continue, or Ray continues, with the story of Nancy Yuen. So I will begin the reading. With clear signs of growing danger, what would move the mothers of small children to risk the frightful prospect of being cut off for an indefinite period from those children, even separated from a 1-year-old baby? They knew that the missionaries had ceased such activity, yet they continued on. Why? Did they and the other Chinese witnesses view going from door to door as something entirely optional, just one of many acceptable ways, of sharing scriptural information with other persons? Or did they view it as the way to proclaim the good news, a God-ordained way that they were under obligation to carry out? If the latter is the case, why did they feel that way? What or who caused them to adopt that view?
14 years after the article about Stanley Jones appeared, the July 15, 1979 Watchtower carried an article containing a first-person account by Nancy Yuen, now released from prison. This article prepared the way for a major article in the same issue on the importance of house-to-house witnessing, an article written by governing body member Lloyd Barry. Nancy Yuen tells what happened to her and why it came about. This is a direct quote from Nancy Yuen's account. By early 1956, we began to get warnings to stop our preaching and confine our activity to the Kingdom Hall. However, I felt that I had to carry out our God-given commission to preach, so I continued to engage in the door-to-door work. I was repeatedly arrested and detained for questioning, the detention sometimes lasting for 5 hours and sometimes up to 3 days. In the meantime, because my husband had moved to Hong Kong in 1953, I applied for permission to join him there. The authorities said they would issue my exit permit on the condition that I stop preaching. I refused to stop and consequently never obtained the permit.
All Christians should view themselves as having a, quote, God-given commission to make expression of their faith to others. They should be willing to suffer loss of freedom, even of life itself, rather than prove unfaithful to that commission. That is certainly not at issue here, nor is there any rightful reason to doubt the sincerity of Nancy Yuen, or seek to detract from the self-sacrificing attitude she demonstrated. She is clearly a woman of great determination. The real question is, does God's commission to Christians as to making known the good news carry along with it a duty to do this by a particular method, namely by going from door to door? Is that method something taught in Scripture as the preeminent way of proclaiming the good news, an identifying mark of the true follower of Jesus Christ? Nancy Yuen evidently had come to believe this, since her own words indicate that she viewed such activity as something she had to do. The Watchtower Society's representative said nothing to give her or the other mother of 4 children any reason to believe otherwise. That her example was used to prepare the way for an article by a governing body member in favor of house-to-house witnessing surely implies an approval of that attitude.
What happened to Nancy Yuen as a result of the viewpoint she had come to hold and believe as scriptural? She relates, quote, "Finally, in the latter part of 1956, after being arrested 6 times for preaching, I was again detained when a householder notified the authorities that I was preaching from house to house. After that, I was not released." End of quote. Before she could again be finally united as a family with her husband and children in Hong Kong, 23 years went by. Her children were now no longer young children, but grown adults in their late 20s and early 30s. She had not been with them during most of their formative years. She had first been detained for 4 years until her trial, was then sentenced to prison, and after some years was released, began preaching again, and was rearrested and sentenced again. These prison sentences totaling 20 years in all.
In a letter I received from a witness in a Midwestern state, the writer, herself a mother of 3 children, said, quote, "I don't know how you feel about things like that, but I burst into tears after I finished reading it." End of quote. She went on to explain that what most deeply upset her for days thereafter was the question, did that have to happen? Is it actually God who requires or impels his servants to engage in this door-to-door activity at such a cost? Or is it men? Nancy Yuen stated her belief, saying, quote, "I had to give up everything, even my little children, to be loyal to God." Well, I almost wanted to cry too when I read this.
The fact that Nancy Yuen's example should be cited in an article by a governing body member supporting field service in 1979, after the woman has spent, 20 years apart from her family, shows you how far the Watchtower is willing to go to demonstrate that somehow this is, well, she says it, loyalty to God. Where in the book of Acts or anywhere in Scripture is this the mark that demonstrates your faithfulness or loyalty to God?
And this particular method, they were not banning them from studying, from going to the Kingdom Hall, from talking to people, but just not door-to-door canvassing. So they make that, the mark of whether or not they're loyal to God. It just seems such a twisting of Scripture. Yes, God likes that we want to share our faith, we want to share our beliefs, but this focusing in on one method of doing it, and even looking at that commission and not looking at who it's given to, is another problem.
We'll deal in another video with what we have seen in our experience, which includes not only broken marriages broken up by this type of misplaced priority, but even suicides within the witness community of people who felt so guilty, as Ray says here. Like Catholics would feel guilty about missing communion or confession, witnesses would feel guilty about not living up to the standard when it comes to field service. So the Watchtower has a lot of blood to account for beyond just blood transfusions. And Ray goes in the next segment to analyzing this. Has Nancy Yuen and many others, probably to this day, reasoned upon this as a higher priority than even taking care of your God-given family? Is going out and fishing for sheep.
God gave you those children to raise. Where is that responsibility then?
Ray's analysis of these misplaced priorities in the next segment.